you want to automate but don't have time to develop the skill set? Try our Easy Motion hardware and software bundle. It's like T-slot extrusions or automation programming. The functional elements are already built for you. All you need to do is connect them together to create fast, easy, and endlessly customizable motion solutions. Learn more at teampipeline.us.
And then also just asking for help when I needed it, being able to set aside your pride and saying, hey, you know what, this is a little much right now. Like, is there kind of some temporary relief that I could get from, either my respective leaders or other leaders in the group?
Hello and welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Our guest today is Geoff Gaw, an experienced mechanical engineer specializing in the medical device industry. With a degree in mechanical engineering and minors in material science and energy engineering from Cal Poly Pomona, he has held technical roles at Edwards Lifesciences, Medtronic, and Applied Medical. His expertise spans project management, product and process development, and manufacturing support. He's overseen the development of complex medical devices, scaling teams, and driving operational excellence from early development stages to mass production. Currently, he serves as a senior principal engineer at Edwards Lifesciences. Geoff, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. I appreciate it. Listened to a couple of episodes. Looking forward to helping your fans and hopefully we could inspire some people out there.
I think my fans are limited to maybe my mother-in-law and my sister or something like that. But there are some people who listen to the show anyway. And we are trying to build a repository of engineering insight and wisdom and knowledge. So thank you so much for being willing to contribute it to that repository and help the engineering community at large.
Yeah, definitely. Of course.
Okay, so first question, what made you decide to become an engineer?
Yeah, let's see. So honestly, at least for me, the way I grew up, I didn't really have an idea of what engineering was. And I really didn't know too much about it until it was time to basically declare for a major. Which, might be a little late for most people, or I don't know, maybe it's a little too early now. There was a big push from my family to basically make me go into nursing, healthcare in some way. And, that really wasn't my thing. My thing was, or I kind of floated the idea of business and marketing. But that was that wasn't so popular within a typical Asian household. So I kind of just had to do some research between math or science, and that's kind of how I found engineering as a field. I selected mechanical engineering because I read up that you're looking at a jack of all trades, master of none. So I kind of like that flexibility in my head. But really, I think, going into the major, pretty undecided and unsure, the I guess event that really cemented it for me was, as corny as it sounds, is basically the first Iron Man movie that actually came out in May 2008, which is when I was graduating. So that gave me, just seeing the movie and then realizing, obviously it's a fictitious kind of level of possibilities. That was inspiring. I got inspired, and it felt better going into the major and the studies that I'm going to be looking forward to in the future.
That's really cool. I remember watching that movie and also loving the engineering aspect of it, right? Tony Stark and Jarvis and their little product development lab down in the basement. It's always funny as an engineer watching movies like that, and, of course it's a movie, right? So you kind of expect some of this. In like a day, he makes these huge changes, right? And technological advancements in his suit, and Jarvis is doing his thing. And you sit back and you realize, that's probably like 2 years of work right there that they just did it in a day and a half.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think the, it's definitely an ambitious version of what, our industry is, but, I just like the possibility. Like, to me, that's kind of what was like awe-inspiring. Is like, yes, that's like 2, 3, maybe 5 years of work, but it's something that that is possible. So,
yeah, cool. Yep, absolutely. And it probably wouldn't have been nearly as interesting a film if we had to watch 2 years of Tony Stark developing things.
Yeah.
So
2 years.
Good call by the director.
Trying to escape a cave in the mountains. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, you have some expertise working with metals in medical devices specifically. What have been some unique processes involving metals, or maybe some unique challenges that you've run into specifically in the context of metals?
Yeah. Well, so I have like total appreciation for all the intricacies that go into metal manufacturing. Prior to my current role at Edwards, what I found the most interesting at the time was metal injection molding. Cause that was maybe when I got exposed to it, was like maybe it wasn't fairly new to the industry, but fairly new to my department and like what we were doing day in day out. I would say that was like for the longest time maybe the most interesting thing from metal fabrication for me, just because you're creating all these organic shapes, but basically leveraging like injection molding in a sense, right? Like the concept and idea of it. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into metal injection molding than that, but from a general perspective, then at Edwards, I would say like shape setting has been like a very unique processing that I've been exposed to. I'm still like very new to the whole shape setting world, and like until Edwards, I rarely ever worked with nitinol material, and at Edwards, that's all it is. That's like their bread and butter. So I would say like as of today, shape setting by far is probably the most unique, and also like nitinol material in general is still so young in the industry. There's so much to learn from it. So it's still an alloy that continued to be discovered and studied, and kind of different uses for it. Right? So.
I remember the first time I handled a piece of nitinol. It was a piece of nitinol wire, fairly thin, maybe like, I don't know, 20 thou in diameter or something like that. And being amazed at the super elasticity of it, right? Bending it and expecting it to plastically deform, but no, it didn't. It was still within its elastic range. I know nitinol has a couple different like transitional areas, and I don't recall the names of them, but bending it a lot and it would spring right back to its original shape, which was really, really cool. I never got to experience any of the shape setting properties of it. Now, I don't pretend to understand them well at all, but basically you set the shape somehow, and then when you heat it up, it kind of like reforms itself into that shape. Is that more or less how that goes?
Yeah. That's, I think from a general aspect, as accurate as it can be, you're leveraging a tool that typically would go into like a salt bath, because you want the material to basically experience homogeneous temperature all around it as it's being cooked. Okay. Like that's the definition of cooked, or that's kind of what people say it, or that's what people say in my department. But yeah, you cook them, and then you have to identify like the proper time frame for it to kind of be at a certain temperature range. And then it'll, like you said, hold its shape once you take it back out of the salt bath and remove it from the fixturing or tooling that you use to basically place that component in. And then, it retains shape. It's pretty cool. I think the complexities that go into it, like, like you said, like shape retention, the tricky part there is and I'm still learning, so I may say some incorrect facts, hopefully not, but basically nitinol has a AF temperature that kind of determines its stiffness within like its environment. So if the material had like a AF temperature that was close to room temperature, it's likely to be in a different phase of like its material phases as nitinol. And you're not going to have the same stiffness, or it might become like more malleable. So that's also another kind of tricky part about like shape setting. You want to ensure that you're setting the AF temperature to something well below of your operating range.
Fascinating. I bet we could do a whole episode just on nitinol and its properties.
Oh, you definitely can. I would not be the person for that. You definitely want to find somebody with like decades of experience. But I mean, it's like never ending kind of subject, which is nice. It's very cool to learn.
All right, we'll move on from nitinol for now. Maybe next year when you're like stratosphere level expert, we'll have you back and we'll do a full episode on nitinol then.
Yeah, maybe.
But for now, so you work in a highly regulated environment, medical devices, right? The FDA regulates medical device companies. What are some challenges that you've had leading teams through product development phases in such a highly regulated environment, and some strategies that you've used to most effectively like manage teams in that process?
Yes.
I know documentation is probably like a big thing, right? There's lots of documentation in medical devices.
Yeah. I mean, the documentation aspect, in my mind, when I strategize of like how to form a team around a program, you have to pick, like, if you can handpick your team members or the team, that's always the most ideal, because you're going to handpick the right characteristics and traits. But to your point, you don't always, because of the documentation details, and in reality, I don't always get to handpick the team. You're going to have individuals that kind of just struggle in that environment. So, my option one, if I had the strategy to go about managing a team, is I would just select people that understand the value of like the documentation aspect, because I think I don't like it. A lot of people don't like it, but I think as long as you understand the value of it, it's a lot more manageable as an individual to go about your day knowing that, hey, you're going to have to draft up all these documents in order to show objective evidence, right, that the product you're making is sound and viable. But obviously most of the time you don't get to pick the people, so you kind of have to try to empower the stronger individuals in your team to lead their respective areas, and kind of just like drive them to motivate others, because you can't be there to motivate everybody else for that common goal all the time. And plus, like, most people are like, whatever, he's just saying that because he's a manager. You've got to say that. You hear from your peers, it's a little bit different.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. There was a period when you were at Medtronic where you scaled a team. I think you almost kind of doubled the team's size, going from like 11 to 21 engineers or somewhere around there. What were some things that you did because as a team grows larger, it becomes a lot harder for people to communicate, for the left hand to know what the right hand is doing. it seems like a level of, I don't want to say bureaucracy, but I don't know, just logistical challenges enter. Were there anything that you did in particular to like mitigate the level of overhead as the number of people grew in the team?
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely very challenging to expand the team that quickly, within Medtronic. But one thing that I would say that kind of helped me going into this challenge was that it was almost like this wasn't my first time doing it. Like I've had experience, the fortunate experience and in prior roles to scale teams up, from like, it was just two engineers, or myself and another engineer, to like 13 by the end of the year. Like so part of, I guess, how I went about this is, one, I've been fortunate enough to have the experience. So that was good. Like I knew what to look for. I knew the traits that I needed. And I knew how to interview and kind of churn through the process of, getting people into phone interviews, figuring out who they are and kind of getting a feel for them. But at the same time, it's almost like echoing what I was trying, how I manage a team is basically I like to identify individuals that are high performers and kind of leverage them in opportunities to lead, mainly in the technical stream. I try not to push people to like become managers because it's a lot of administrative stuff, and 9 times out of 10 people, like engineers, don't want to do that. Like they want to do all the fun technical work. So I leverage that to help me, as you say, like have limited overhead, right? Like I didn't need to be there to see everything because I had X amount, I had maybe 5, 6 people that I could rely on consistently that would kind of be my eyes and ears, and I would just trust that process. You can't scale this fast and micromanage everybody. Like it's impossible. You'll drown. Like you won't be sleeping. Like it's gonna be, it's gonna be a process. Just like basically continuous pain for you. But yeah, definitely. I think the experience and the leader, like local leaders, was the biggest thing. They really, without either of them, it would be a struggle. And then also just asking for help when I needed it. Like, being able to set aside your pride and saying, hey, you know what, this is a little much right now. Like, is there kind of some temporary relief that I could get from, either my respective leaders or other leaders in the group?
I think that's huge. Being able to ask for help. I did a series just recently. I guess technically it hasn't concluded, but we've been doing a series focused on the question of how to accelerate the speed of engineering. The whole episodes have been about those. And one of the items that has come up a lot is engineers not asking for help soon enough, just continually struggling, trying to solve a problem themselves, which is understandable because A, that's what engineers like doing, is solving problems. And B, like you said, it can feel a little uncomfortable to ask for help, right? You maybe think to yourself, oh, I'm not doing something right if I need to ask for help. I shouldn't need to ask for help. I should be able to figure this out, when that's not the case at all. In my opinion, no one knows how to do everything, especially if you're in a new environment. So I think being able to ask for help is a huge asset.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree.
Well, you've worked quite a bit in both product development and process development. And when I say process development, I'm largely referring to manufacturing. At what point in the product development process do you start thinking about process and like kind of how do you align those two phases of a program or the people working in those two areas of the program?
Yeah. So there's definitely more than one way to achieve success and kind of like this question. But from my experience and like this, my answer to this, if I were being asked like every 2 years, would probably change based on the experience and the exposure that I've had the opportunity of having thus far. But as of today, like the way I view this is in the early phase of product development, you're not thinking about repeatability or reproducibility of that process. You're thinking about the capability of achieving, said function or dimensions. Because you're just trying to get a product that will work and have some success in its basically clinical target. Now, I think to answer your question of like, when do you start thinking about the process? Well, I now understand why 9 times out of 10, you don't really think about the process until you have a successful product, right? Like until you have objective evidence that, hey, this product is going to be viable. And that is where my answer would be. Now, the caveat to that is like, I think the word alignment in your question, right? It's more like alignment with leadership. That's like the biggest thing. Because to them, once they see a successful product, they see the finish line. They don't really see all of the obstacles that currently exist to get to that finish line. And that will basically define how well is your process going to be.
So leadership might see beyond just a functional prototype. Maybe you've gone into clinical trials with something, so it's pretty matured from a design standpoint, I guess. Mm-hmm. And they might see this device working well, it's being successful, it's getting good reviews, and they might think, "Great, we're done, we're ready to go into production." Yeah. But really, there's this like what could be, and maybe at times should be, an extensive process of design for manufacturability, right? Yeah. Figuring out, all right, how do we make this cheap, reliable, high quality to manufacture now?
Yeah. And I think, in that instance, it's like very critical to have the right people assess what is capable in a year span, what is capable of, what a success look like in 2 years, right? Because you're going to have varying different answers. I've seen programs, I've seen acquisitions kind of set unrealistic expectations. At the higher level, whereas like the people on the ground level understand like, hey, this product is like 2 years out for being even reasonably feasible for commercial, right? So, I think definitely that's the key factor. But hey, if you just honestly have just teams of engineers working on things, I mean, I think you'll have more success in the long run. But maybe you won't get the business out there in time. So it's kind of like a balancing game.
Yeah, right. We don't just have all the time and money in the world to deliver a perfect product. There are business constraints that we need to be cognizant of.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned that in the early stages of R&D, you're not thinking about process that much. At what point, what's the trigger for you to where you start thinking, okay, now we need to really think about process and DFM and those sorts of things?
Yeah. I mean, for me, the biggest trigger is like seeing that confidence in the product's objective data at like you said, if you go to clinical trials and you're already starting to get signals of, hey, this product is doing well, some people have been in the industry long enough to kind of see the on-ramp starting to develop. And that's really
Got it. Yeah.
that's really when a team should be focused on. Like, it might be work that, becomes nothing because you're taking the risk of the parallel activities, but you're also kind of getting ahead of like leadership expectations, right? Because once
Yeah.
the formal trials are completed and you have your results, and it is as was predicted, then you're just sprinting from that point. So I would say, yeah, getting early signals that your product is going to be viable and successful. That's where you want to start exploring different avenues of manufacturability.
Nice. Terrific. All right. Well, I'm going to take a short break here and share with the listeners that sometimes people think that Aaron is a podcast host, and that's what he does, which is not the case. My day job is president at Pipeline Design and Engineering, where we don't design pipelines, but we do help companies develop advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services. You can learn more at teampipeline.us. The podcast is also sponsored by The Wave, an online platform of free tools, education, and community for engineers. Learn more at thewave.engineer. And today we are thrilled to be speaking with Geoff Gaw. So Geoff, can you talk maybe about some of the key differences in your approach to developing early phase medical devices versus taking them into mass production? We kind of hit on it a little bit already, but if you could expound on that a little bit, what are the key differences in going into mass production versus the early stage R&D efforts?
I would say early phase is a lot of experimenting, different approaches that have never been done before, or maybe you think have never been done before because it's not a popular attempt at a solution. Actually, what I would say is, like, I guess in my current role, from my own perspective, and just my perspective, have been amazed at like the ideas that have come through the pipeline and the success at our team's capabilities of producing said designs. Like, it's just unheard of, at least from my perspective, for a company of this size to have that capability, because that's more, you almost think it's like more of like a startup vibe a little bit, right? Like,
wow, yeah, that's great.
But yeah, I think what I've seen is we do a lot of experimenting, different approaches of how to achieve certain clinical targets, and honestly, we're not afraid to iterate and spend the time kind of failing fast and moving on to the next thing, and realizing, all right, that didn't work, but maybe we could change something about the design to make it work. And what will that be like? What would that present from a functional clinical outcome? It's a lot of, it's like a big sandbox, right? You're playing until something sticks.
I also love the R&D phase of projects where you're inventing something, you're figuring out something brand new, you're exploring, you're experimenting. That's always where I've enjoyed that phase the most, as opposed to like maybe a sustaining role where, maybe you're making incremental improvements to a project or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, so now I guess going back to the second part of your question, like what are the approaches, like how are they different for like mass production, designing for mass production? Well, the fact that you're not in the sandbox, like the fact that you have all these outputs that are now defined, then you're more so kind of researching and looking at, what's out there in the industry to perform high-speed inspections, or achieve certain tolerances or basically outputs that would be cost effective. It's more mass production. Everything is defined. Like, I guess that's the best way to differentiate the two, right? One is more, you have like a general goal, but you're given like different approaches of how to achieve that goal. With mass production, you have a very nice, thought out plan, and there's already different approaches out there, and you kind of just have to select the ones that makes the most sense and that fits your requirements. It's still fun for me, at least. I enjoy like figuring out a solution that improves throughput by like 200%. I enjoy being able to kind of present that value. It's a different value you're presenting, and I think everybody I honestly think like both sides of development is like has their art to it in a way, right? Like inventing something from scratch, not taking that invention and mass producing it. Like that's also a different, you're like a different artist, right? Going from like a sculptor to a painter to something else. So I've always appreciated both ends.
So that's a good point there, that they're almost different skill sets. Well, I think they are different skill sets. In your experience, has it been different teams who have focused on the R&D versus the transfer to production side, or has it often been the same team that takes it all the way through?
Yeah, this is like, I would say like a very common argument feedback that everybody has. Like, you meet engineers that just, I just want to be R&D the rest of my life. That's all I want to do. Then you meet like engineers that want to do everything. They want to invent the product. They want to mass produce it. They want to figure out, like, they want to basically problem solve throughout the whole cradle to grave aspect of the product, at least even in the medical industry.
And have you seen the same teams go all the way from R&D through production, or have you typically seen like one team focusing on the R&D and then maybe another team comes in to transfer to production, do the DFM, all that stuff?
Yeah, I've seen it done both ways. I've seen it be the same group of people from start to finish, and I've seen it where you have different groups of people that kind of just it's like handing the baton off, right, for the marathon. Yeah. I mean, I think both approaches can work. It just depends on the teams. You got to have the right people at the right time, and they all have their pros and cons. Like, to me, it would be equal. My personal preference is I like being cradle to grave. Like, I like being at the beginning all the way through the end, because it just helps me understand what the importance of everything is from their designs, right? Like the core reasons for these dimensions versus like having to try to figure out why did they dimension it this way? Why did they put an arm there where I wouldn't have put an arm? Why did they put a feature? Like, it just helps for me just kind of see the whole picture. So I enjoyed that aspect.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. If you have to find the right person, because not everyone thrives in that cradle to grave environment. But if you find the right people, being able to have the same team take it from R&D through production, doing all the tooling and helping scale things up, maintain high quality, the continuity throughout that process is so important. I mean, the less you have to transfer knowledge from one person's brain to another person's brain, the better your program will be because of it. So if you can find the right people who thrive in that cradle to grave environment, then all the better.
Yeah. And that's like a key thing that you said, it's that transfer of knowledge doesn't always get transferred, and you're really wasting time, right? Because now it's like you have this other group that's just like reinventing the wheel, trying to figure out why things happen for the reason that they happen.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's I think that's a big area where I won't say teams falter, but it's a major factor in why projects slow down or falter sometimes.
Yeah. I've seen it, man. I've seen it too many times.
I can tell you're speaking from experience there.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, what are some ways that you have found to stay up to date with, emerging trends, new manufacturing technologies, especially within medical devices, but it can be outside of medical devices as well.
Yeah. From my experience, I've always just been very I've delved so deep into my roles and the places I work for that I honestly continue to find different technologies or products or different problems within my day to day that it almost keeps me too busy to have the bandwidth to explore different just opportunities. My first day at Applied, they were big on vertical integration. So, I mean, unless I've touched every process there, it's there's always all these new things that I'm learning, from packaging all the way to finished good product assembly. So I guess I've been lucky in that sense. And when I've moved moved companies that alone, it's just, you have a whole new horizon to kind of explore. I was at Medtronic. They had, at the time, I think they had 20 business units.
Wow.
I remember interviewing for their roles, and it was almost impossible for me to figure out which department was which. How can I get a leg up with against the people I'm interviewing against with finding product knowledge? I can't, because it's the website was so convoluted I couldn't find anything. But I would say, I've just been lucky. There's definitely a lot, and even now, you're talking about advancements in material science. I've never worked with Nitinol, and just realizing the almost significant amount of applications for the material that's just been fun.
I think that's a really insightful answer. I mean, you hear kind of typical answers like, I go to trade shows or just searching on Google or whatever, but changing companies is one I don't think I've heard before. And that's a really good one, because there are all kinds of new processes, new technologies, new ways of doing things that just inherently are different one company to the next.
Yeah. Imagine if you changed industry, right? That is, it's a different kind of world. Everybody's got different lingos, and it's a whole new, it's a whole new thing. But I've just kind of kept my head in the day to day, and it's given me these opportunities. So it's been fun. Sorry for anybody out there that I guess we're looking for something different.
That's great. All right. Well, looking ahead the next, 5 to 10 years or so, what do you think the industry is heading, the medical device industry specifically, since that's where the bulk of your experience is? What do you see happening in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. It's the things or the technologies that I've seen, I've never expected to see, but they exist. Right? I think the easiest answer that probably most people would be able to find right now is just how would you integrate AI, right, to the opportunities of certain types of procedures. I think that in a way is probably the next stage, because I've heard it, just different companies, coworkers, there's been talk, not to the point where it's taking over, but it's definitely a topic that exists.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. So there's there's that opportunity. I mean, I guess from my perspective, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Because it's like there's so much power to this type of technology, but then there's also like, could there be that much risk on the other side, right? So.
Right. Yeah. We have a lot less control once AI steps in, right? We don't really know what's going on under the hood.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you're the guy that made the AI, right? So.
Even then, I feel like the complexities of true AI.
Yeah.
I was talking with a technologist. What's his name? Kevin. Can't remember his last name, but he was telling me how in a medical application, it was like screening for cancer or something like that. Mm-hmm. They would feed like X-rays into an AI and teach it like which patients had cancer and which ones didn't, and it got to the point where the AI could predict which ones had cancer, even sometimes when doctors couldn't look at the X-ray or the scan, whatever the data was. I don't even know if it was an X-ray, some kind of data. The doctors couldn't even predict it, but the AI could predict it. And the AI didn't have the vocabulary to explain to the doctors why it knew that there was cancer in that patient, because the methodologies or the processes by which the AI work are that there aren't necessarily words for it. It's like this brand new thing. So I thought that was really interesting. Like the AI didn't have the words to explain how it knew what it knew.
That is interesting. Aside from like my experience with like, Google or like ChatGPT, I have yet to experience like what you just said, like true AI. Like an actual computing being that is like free of commands, right? Because like even like when you do, ChatGPT is cool. It's like how do I explain it? So it's a more advanced search, Google search, in a way.
Yeah, right.
But I'm still providing boundary conditions. I'm not, it's not like off on its own, just like coming at me with conversation topics.
Right. Yeah. Well, let me give you one more question, and then we'll wrap things up here. What's one thing that you have seen or done to accelerate the speed of engineering? To reduce the amount of time required to complete a project or to advance a project more quickly than maybe it would have otherwise.
Yeah. So I would say, people that are leaders of programs or projects, like they, I would think part of their main responsibilities is to almost like foresee the roadblocks. And most of these roadblocks, from my experience, have been like bureaucratic. It's a lot of, red tape that you kind of just need to get ahead of it. Whether it's like, some examples are like this manufacturing plant has a different set of SOPs that, this other plant is used to, but you have to somehow integrate and work together. Like getting ahead of that is big. It's not fun because that kind of resolution is more, I would say kind of like red tape. You're trying to figure out what works between both plants. It's not really, I would say like a technical challenge, more like people development, I guess, people skill thing. But doing that and letting the engineering team do the technical work, I think that, in my opinion, how you speed up programs, like to keep them out of this just back and forth, all these people related problem solving that most engineering teams don't want to do. And that's really, in my opinion, where you could be the most effective as either a people leader or a program manager.
Yeah. Removing those obstacles, the politics, the bureaucracies, and just allowing them to focus on the technical work, the engineering.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Yeah. Great. All right. Well, Geoff, thank you so much for being on the show today. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn.
We'll put a link to your profile,
Well,
LinkedIn
there you
profile.
go. There you go.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Well, great, Geoff. Thank you so much again for being on the show today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your time and thanks for having me.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.